Archie, what are the main barriers to wealth?
Well, Jimmy, it kind of depends on how you define wealth. I'm Archie Hoxton.
And I'm Rob Hoxton.
And this is Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. Welcome back to the Last Paycheck Podcast, brought to you by Hoxton Planning and Management. We're your hosts, Archie Hoxton and Jimmy Sutch, and today we're talking about barriers, specifically barriers to building wealth. There's a lot of ways that you can sabotage yourself, that you can create unnecessary obstacles to building wealth, which is already hard enough as it is because we're not really wired for wealth building, where most of us are wired for in the moment, what makes sense, what do I want, spend. So we're going to talk about those barriers to see if maybe you're up against one of them and maybe you can overcome that or get past it or avoid it altogether.
Right. I think the best way to start this is for us to give a sense of what we believe wealth is. So like, how do you define wealth?
You know, I tend to, the first thing I'd think of with wealth is I tend to think of kind of a more financial perspective. I think of like your net worth statement. And now I know there's a lot of dynamics to wealth and people have their own definitions, but at the most basic level, I think it has to do with, you know, how much wealth you have has a lot to do with what your net worth is. And again, that's assets minus liabilities equals net worth. So what you have minus what you owe, right? But it's more than that because you can have a really big net worth and still feel broke, right?
Right. And so there's another way to take that too. So wealth to me always means kind of like abundance and security, right? The debate, I think, comes with the abundance part.
Yeah.
Right? Because some people might look at the abundance piece and say like, oh, I need a lot of money to be considered wealthy.
Yeah.
Right? And other people, and you see this with a lot of younger people, is, hey, they actually might value time more than the dollar.
Yeah.
Right? So the abundance piece and security, the abundance component can be debated by a few, but abundance and security, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I love that idea because they all kind of go together.
Right.
Like, the more financial wealth you have, the more of other types of wealth that you could have. I mean, it gives you freedom. It gives you the ability to not spend all of your time trying to earn money.
Right.
Maybe you can devote more time to
your health
or
happiness or whatever it may be.
Relationships.
Yep.
You know, and that gets into a much broader idea of maybe success in general and how people define it.
So I guess the point really is everybody defines it quite differently.
Yeah.
Truthfully.
Yeah. Because like I said, I mean, if you have a giant net worth and maybe it's just all tied up into a house, a really expensive house, but you don't actually have much money and you have a low income, somehow maybe you inherited something and you might feel broke, but your net worth would be big, but you'd be missing out all those other sort of abundance. Your mental health probably would suck because you're feeling behind and you're feeling kind of broke. Maybe your health is suffering and maybe your relationships are suffering. So
for the sake of today, we'll kind of focus on some things that we can avoid to make better financial wealth.
Yeah.
Rather than anything else. And hopefully with financial blessings come the other things that you may value.
Some of these things end up being some of the most stressful things that you can have in your life. And so if you avoid these, you'll probably end up with just a happier, richer life in general. And the first one that I think of is debt. You want to talk about something that can create stress and steal all the joy out of your life.
Of course.
Debt. Now, debt isn't always a bad thing, right?
Right, because you can leverage it, of course, to create more wealth.
Yeah.
On occasions.
Like, if you tried to save up for a house and pay all cash starting from nothing, it would take you most of your career just to do it. That's where debt can come in. You can get you into a house with a manageable payment over 15, 30 years or whatever.
Yeah, like to oversimplify, right? Like debt isn't always terrible if it's going towards something that's like an appreciating asset.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Our problem probably comes in when you use debt to buy a depreciating asset like a vehicle.
Or a consumable thing that's gone
Right.
as soon as you buy it.
Right.
10 grand in McDonald's charges on a credit card.
Right. So one of the most fascinating things that I find is people's willingness to buy a vehicle, especially at a high expense, right? But everybody needs a reliable vehicle to get to work or, take kids to practice or whatever. But the average car payment in the U.S. is about $740 per month, which is quite fascinating, really. So I just played with the numbers, right? And like we always talk about, investing is really built for young people, but you don't realize it till you're old.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's just say we're able to still buy a reliable vehicle, but reduce that car payment by $300. And we take that $300 and we invest it to some extent, whether that's in a Roth or a brokerage account or a traditional IRA, whatever it is. And then let's just say we get, 6 or 7% over a 15, 20-year period. That can be the difference of $100,000 to $200,000, depending on the time frame and depending on your rate of return. But that's quite significant when the average 50-year-old only has $150,000 in a 401k, right?
Right.
So over time, especially the long term, a modest change like that can be very, very meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. Just even, and it's not even to say that you're not taking out a car loan,
Right.
Which if you can avoid that, better yet. That's just to say that you just take a smaller car loan and invest the difference. That could be really meaningful in your wealth building journey.
Right. And I do get a little pushback, right? Because everybody needs a reliable and safe vehicle.
Yeah.
So I get that, but when you read these studies and people on average are spending $740 per month on a vehicle, a depreciating asset,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that can be devastating to your wealth.
Yeah, because if you look at vehicles, I mean, you don't need to, unless you've been kind of you've been going upside down in car loans and then rolling that into a new car loan and getting a new car ever so often, which can be terribly devastating. If you're not doing that, then you don't need to have a car payment that high to get into it. Just might not be like the most exciting thing. But that's a huge barrier. I would say just any kind of debt that isn't moving your net worth up in some way or another. And what do we mean by that? A mortgage, right?
Mm.
That's moving your net worth in a positive direction. You need a place to live. And most people can't realistically buy a house in cash, at least not until much, much later in life, or when they have another house to sell. So another one might be a student loan. A student loan can, if you, let's say, are careful with the degree that you get and find a great job after, that can be moving your net worth in the positive direction. It's increasing your earning potential. But things like the typical stuff that go onto credit cards, consumables that are, you buy it, you consume it, it's gone forever. Or cars that depreciate. Or, anything else that you can imagine that isn't, again, moving your net worth in a positive direction.
Yeah, another absurd statistic, and I can't always articulate these down to the decimal point, but depending on the study, about 40 to 45% of U.S. households wind up getting a divorce, right? And so you are very lucky if you are lucky enough to pick the right one the first time.
Yeah.
But a lot of people go through these situations in life that are tough to overcome and still accumulate wealth, right?
Yeah.
Especially something as meaningful as a divorce. And I'm sorry, Mom, for talking about divorces, but nonetheless, if you can avoid that, that's tough to do.
Yeah. It is a tough thing to avoid if you're just in a relationship that isn't panning out. But I would say that is one of the things that can really, really become a massive barrier. I mean, if you work hard and build something together, and then, each of you goes off with half of it, and or maybe it's not quite half and half, maybe it doesn't work out like that depending on the specifics. But yeah, I mean, that can be something that will set you back quite a bit, especially if it's in sort of the years where the size of your contributions towards your objectives matter the most because you're earning the most money. Yeah, it can be devastating to your net worth.
So if our wives are listening, we love you. But the second piece, right? And we each have kids, right? I have 2, you have 1, and our families are kind of growing, right? So to some extent, I knock on wood as I say this too, because, hopefully at some point we don't have like a 30-year-old child living in our basement, right? But the average cost to raise a child from 0 to 18 is $230,000, roughly, right? And so, I think, and that's only until they're 18 years old, right? You do have things, especially if you have a daughter, maybe sometimes you have to worry about a wedding.
Yeah, college,
of course, of course. So there are things out there that are part of life that do pose kind of financial challenges that you kind of got to get through.
Yeah. And that's not to say don't have kids. Having kids is a wonderful, fulfilling, awesome thing. And I'm a huge proponent of it. But, that's a major, major cost. But again, then it also kind of plays to the other side of things, like the relationships and the happiness and life satisfaction.
Right.
Kids can contribute to that in a really big way, even though maybe they detract from your financial wealth building. Another really big one that I would say we see a lot in our work is investment decision making.
Oh, of course. Yep.
And probably one of the biggest temptations when it comes to, and costliest mistakes when it comes to investing, aside from not investing at all and just kind of letting your money sit in cash, next to that is probably market timing and reacting to the markets based on emotion, like fear and greed, letting that guide your decision-making process with investing, rather than having a disciplined approach based on a strategy where you have an asset allocation that matches your goals and your risk tolerance. That can be a huge detractor.
Yeah, I mean, there's modest things too. It's like, even if you're able to save, if you're lucky enough to save up, a couple dollars at the bank, even the dollars that you let sit in a simple savings account, and making those earn 4% instead of 1%.
Yeah.
Luckily enough, over a long period of time, that can make you a couple dollars, right? And kind of push in the right direction. Now, hopefully you're, listening to a podcast like this and moving over, assets to a Roth IRA or a brokerage account and investing them in things that outpace inflation over time. But yeah, investing is key. It's almost just like getting the notion to invest is just so important. And I see a lot of people we talk to have a lot of assets in cash if they sold a house or a property of some kind. And there's a couple $100,000 that has been sitting at a savings account and not a brokerage account or an investment account, that could have been very, very lucrative over the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, we get events in the market that are scary. And when the market's down, in a big way, it's really tempting to get out and go to cash.
Yeah.
But sometimes those decisions can be more costly than if you had never invested at all, depending on your situation.
Yeah, and every 4 years, we go through, the markets go through some period of uncertainty just based on, the elections here in the U.S., right? So it is every 4 years that is surfaced, and it does make it hard to always continually to stick to the plan, but it's important you do it.
Yeah. Because again, that's another big barrier to wealth building is that investment decisions. Another one, and we'll touch on this really quick, I would say tax planning and bad tax planning versus good tax planning. Making good decisions over the course of your life to minimize the amount of tax that you pay and maximize the amount of wealth that you have left at the end. And we don't need to necessarily get into the details, but taxes for many people, maybe most people, are the largest expense of your life. I mean,
Yeah, by far, we kind of skipped over that, but by far, the biggest barrier to wealth accumulation is the requirement to pay taxes.
yeah, if you didn't have to pay taxes, it would be much simpler.
By far. So, but small decisions over a period of 20 years, even, taking a small, modest savings account and moving it over to a Roth and making that go tax-free, modest decisions like that can accumulate wealth over time.
Yeah. Taking advantage of your employer's retirement plan. Or instead of maybe right now you're contributing just to get the match, maybe you bump that up a couple more %, right? That's going to save you taxes now.
Right.
And it's going to shelter those dollars from taxes for the rest of your career until you're required to take it out when you're in your 70s. I mean, little decisions like that, because for many people, it's our taxes are fairly simple. I earn income, I take a standard deduction, maybe there's a couple other things, and that's it, right? There's not, but these little decisions that you have in your life that affords you some savings and some strategy that will improve your lifetime cumulative tax bill. So anyway, that's about all we have time for today. So I hope you found this interesting, and hopefully you see one or two opportunities for yourself to overcome a barrier and move that net worth in a positive direction, move that financial and life abundance in a positive direction. So if you like this, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment if you have questions, and as always, share it with your family and friends, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, guys.
You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.